All right, welcome to our first lesson for Chapter 12 and our first lesson for Unit 3. Chapter 12 is all about land use planning, so planning how we as humans are using the land around us. So this lesson is all about why we should plan. So learning goal or learning objective is that you'll be able to explain why planning is important for future development. So the need for planning. Human development impacts all facets of the environment. So we've talked about how the natural world works kind of in our first unit, and now for the rest of the year, we're talking about how humans are impacting it. And it's because our development, us building cities and moving and all of that has an impact on all parts of the environment. And while it's most apparent in urbanized areas where we have actually fully developed, there's literally no place on the globe that does not bear some evidence of the impact of humankind. So most land use decisions are still based primarily on economic considerations or short-term needs rather than on unique analysis of landscape. So what's cheapest, what's going to make the developer the most money, or what do we need right now versus, okay, let's look at this land and decide long-term what's the best possible use for it. And once land has been converted to intensive human use, it's generally unavailable for other uses. So like this is an abandoned building right now. That would be really hard to then move to use for agriculture or for commercial buildings or whatever it is. Once it's been developed on, it's hard to kind of change it. So historical forces that shaped land use. So present land use in the United States, 52% of all of the land in the U.S. is crops and livestock. 44% is forests and natural areas, and then 4% is intensive human use. This is where most human beings are living and using the land, is going to be 4%. This pattern of land use differs greatly from the original conditions that were experienced by immigrants from the New World, so before we started developing in the U.S. The first U.S. colonists converted landscape to farming and then to towns and cities. So it used to be, obviously 100% forest and natural areas. First, we started to change it for crops and livestock, and then slowly and surely those areas have been changed for intensive human use. Waterways have a huge impact on how we develop. So waterways were the primary method of transportation in early European settlement of North America. We didn't have engines or trains or anything like that. Water, you could put a boat on it and transport things that way. It was a lot easier. This also allowed for exploration and development of commerce. And early towns were usually built near water and at transfer points between water systems. So we wanted to be near water because that's how we got around. It's just like most shops and houses are going to be near roads. At this point, there weren't really roads. We had water as like the highways. So because of this, the waterfront became a center of intense industrial activity. And as industrial activity increased in cities, people began to move from rural to urban centers for job opportunities that these centers presented. So this kind of led to a rural, like farmland, agricultural, to an urban, like city shift. So North America remained essentially rural until the industrial growth began in the last third of the 1800s. Cities grew because of the Industrial Revolution, and people migrated from farms to industrial jobs found in cities. Then there was also migration from the central cities then to the suburbs. So we went from rural to central city, and then because of pollution and transportation, we then got the suburbs. So in the early stages of the Industrial Revolution, a lack of control over industry activities led to polluted, undesirable waterways. And as roads and rail transport became more common, many left the waterway areas. Agricultural land surrounding towns was converted to housing, and then land began to be viewed as a commodity, not as a non-renewable resource to be managed. Because again, because it's so hard to change land from one use to another once we've developed, it is considered a non-renewable resource. So we look at suburbs, they have some specific characteristics. So as cities grew, certain sections within each city began to deteriorate. Pollution and crowding made cities undesirable places to live. And in the early 1900s, people who could afford to move out of the cities began to do so. In 1950, 60% of the urban population lived in central cities. In 1990, that decreased to only 30%. And now it's even less. Most of this is thanks to the convenience of personal automobiles or cars. This escalated that decentralized housing pattern and diminished the importance of mass transit. You could drive your own car, so you could live farther. And if you can drive your own car, why would you need mass transit? because most people prefer to be in their own space. This also led to a huge decrease in energy efficiency. It is way more efficient to ride this train over here because it fits more people and for everyone to drive their own cars. But we don't like it that way. It also increased the cost of supplying utility services because they had to go further out. So we look at suburbs, what we see is urban sprawl. So urban sprawl is a pattern of unplanned, low-density housing and commercial development outside of cities. And land use practices are fundamental to sustainability. Two practices that have contributed to urban sprawl are zoning ordinances that isolate employment and shopping services away from housing locations. So ideally, everything would be in one place. You'd be able to walk to where you work, walk to shop, if that's what you wanted to do. But because of how we currently zone in the US, everything is very separated. And also low density planning, which is aimed at creating automobile access to increasing expanses of land. We are catering to cars. That's how we're planning, not to people walking. So sprawl is typically characterized by excessive land consumption, low densities, and compared with older centers, a lack of choice in ways to travel, fragmented open space, wide gaps in development, and a scattered appearance. Lack of choice in housing types and prices, separations of uses into distinct areas, repetitive one-story development, and then commercial buildings surrounded by large parking areas, and lack of public spaces and community centers. We are catering to a commercial society. And that looks like this. Here's all the houses. There is no other use here but living. We have what looks like a school right here, and then all the stores are going to be farther away. So there's tract development, which is like typical just housing developments, leapfrog developments, and then wealthy suburbs where the houses are bigger and farther apart, but still not a good use of land. And these lights are where we can see regional cities in the United States and Canada. So urban sprawl occurs in three ways. Development of exclusive wealthy suburbs adjacent to the city. Tract development is the construction of similar residential units over large areas, the houses that looks like copy and paste of the same thing. Ribbon sprawl is commercial and industrial buildings lining highways, connecting housing developments to the central city. And the megalopolis is a merging of cities into a large urban area. All right, that is the end of this lesson. Please let me know if you have any questions, and I will see you in the next one.